Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be putting rails on a flight deck. This is a little bit different as the layers of wood are only 5 versus 7 for a flight deck. So you will have to be a little bit more careful regarding putting the rails on. The rails that I'm using today are rib bones. I typically use these or Santa Cruz. I haven't tried any others, but I really like the way that these fit. So the tools that you're going to need today are going to be, of course, the rails. You're going to need a screwdriver or a drill to drill in some pilot holes, and then of course a screwdriver to screw them in. You will need to make sure that you have a drill bit that is the size of the screws that you'll be putting in. So this is the screw. The way you measure it is you put the drill bit in front of the screw. If the teeth of the screw are bigger than the drill bit, then you are good to go. The other thing that you will need is some tape. I use duct tape. And then also I use some wraps to hold the rails on. So the first thing you need to do is figure out where you want the rails. So you'll want to put them on the deck. And then you'll want to take those wraps that I told you about. You can use 1 or you can use 2 depending on what you're more comfortable with. And of course you can use rubber bands, you can use other things, whatever you really want to use. That one's a little bit short, so we're gonna go with a longer one. And just gonna slide it up under the board. And then as you come up and across, this particular one Velcros, so it makes it a little bit easier. So put the rails on the board. Having a little bit of trouble moving it because the grip tape on the bottom is so tight. But then you just kind of pull the tape a little bit tight, a rubber band tight to where you think you might want the rails. And then you can kind of position the rails to wherever you need them to go. So once you get the band around it and you get the rails set, you need to maneuver them around and check to see where you want to have the rails. You need to make sure they're not going to be too close to your wheel wells. This is a little bit of a shorter wheelbase, so I'm worried it might hit. If it does, that means that when I come back later, I will have to cut these edges off. But I'm hoping that it'll be fine and we won't have any problems. Once you get them on, you got them in where you think you want them. I measured each side just to make sure that I had pretty accurate, measurements. And then also you want to take something else. I have another rail here, a white one, and I put it on top to make sure that you're going to get the clearance you want, so that whenever you're on the board and you're doing your tricks, it still hits the rails and doesn't hit your board. So that would be an important point of this. Once you have everything measured out where you want it, take a pen, a Sharpie, whatever, and go through and mark in each hole on your board so that you know where to drill at. So now we're going to take the rails off the board and we're going to drill the holes. Now it's very important that when you're drilling these holes that you remember not to go too far into the board because you could go all the way through. I usually just drill in maybe a couple millimeters, which typically might be like that far. It's hard to judge it, so sometimes you could pop through, sometimes you may not, but for the most part you can go ahead and start doing that. So I just find the hole that I need, And typically I go in a little bit and then I pull the drill bit out just to see how far it went in. But you're just really looking for a pilot hole to get it started. And just going down. Probably, I know it's hard for you guys to see it, but I just make sure that I got a good hole in the board. I'm gonna do the rest of these and then come back. Another thing that you can do whenever you're putting the rails on and you're taping it across to measure where they're at is you can always like draw a little line too if you want to where you know where the rails want to go. Then you can take duct tape, put it on the bottom of the rails, and then match it up to where it needs to go. That's another option that you have. Now, the duct tape thing, I do like to use the duct tape, and typically what I do is I turn it over and I measure the back against the duct tape, and I kind of find a piece that measures about what it would be if you were to measure, you know, since you don't measure exactly, just a piece to kind of measure about where you need it. Of course, that piece didn't come off right, so I'm going to do this, cut it across, and then what I typically do is I roll the duct tape up, and of course, don't do it on your board. One thing that if you do it on your board, what you run into is the design will come off. The duct tape will rip it off. So make sure when you put it on that you're putting it where you want it to go and where you need it the first time. What I'm doing right here is I'm just putting the duct tape on the back. I'm going to do these to all of them, even the little side right here, and then come back. What this does is this gives it just a little bit of lift and a little bit of cushion, and I've liked that on my rails. So now that the rails are completed with the duct tape on it, what I'm going to do now is just line up the holes. That one's lined up, that one's lined up, that one's lined up, and that one and that one. They're all lined up. And then all you have to do is just press it down, and the rail's actually going to stay where it needs to stay. It's going to stay in place there. I'll do that one. I'll come over to the other side. And I'm going to line the middle hole up first. Then I'm going to line, let's see, that one, and that one up. And then those automatically line up. So then press them down. Your rails are in place. So now I'm going to take the screws. And I'm going to go ahead and drop them into the holes. And you can do one at a time if you want to. It's up to you. But since I got them in my hand, I'm putting them in there. I didn't want to lose them. So I'm going to just pop those in there like that. There we go. Same thing over here. Okay, just like that. And now we're just going to tighten them down. So the first one is going to be the middle rail. I'm just going to go in just a little bit. I usually don't go all the way in. I wait until I get all the other ones in. So just screw the rest in just a little bit at a time. And be careful not to strip your screws while you're going in. So you don't want to, if you're going to use electric drill, be very careful with how much power you put on it. Once you get the screw set, then you want to go back and add the pressure to it, putting as much pressure you can on it, but just make sure that the drill goes slow, or that you screwed, when you're screwing it in, that you go really slow until you see the board go down, or the rail go down to the board, and you can feel the resistance. But you don't want to keep going too far than that, because you don't want to drill through it. Oh, also for your flight decks, one of the reasons why you use tape too is so the screw doesn't go through the board, because the screws can go through the other side if it's a flight deck and you're not using a little bit of a cushion there. So just something to keep in mind. And then Put that down. Okay. Got those two more. There we go. So there's the rails on the board. Everything is really good and solid. And I'm feeling the other side. You can see one kind of poked through there just a little bit. If they do poke through, you can file them down, or you just leave it where it's at and just deal with a little piece poking through. But because it's generally not too much, and eventually it's going to wear down anyways. But I probably will take a little file just to file that down. And that's how you get your rails on.